And we are here. What's going on, guys? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. I wanted to thank you so much for joining me this week. I'm very excited to bring you this week's episode. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so that you never miss any one of my videos. Also, please feel free to like the video and share it with all of your friends and family. Also, follow me on Twitter at Lopes Goes Last and on Facebook at Lopes Goes Last Podcast. Link to those will be down in the description below. So, I wanted to start off this video by saying this. If you have already seen one or both of the clips that I have put out for you this week, you do not need to know the information that I'm going to present over the next couple of minutes here. So, if, again, you have seen one or both of those clips, this information will not be new to you, so feel free to kind of skip to the first timestamp in the description. Obviously not the 001, but the first one after that. Feel free to skip to that so that, you don't have to hear the same information twice or three times, whatever the case may be. All right, and for those of you that are still here and are wondering what I am talking about, I wanted to just let you know that this week's podcast, it's going to be a little bit different than we have done in the past. Obviously, I usually have a very specific way of doing things. I go from current events to Tough Talk to all things Boston in a row. They're usually around 30 to 45 minutes each, depending on the week. But this week was the NBA trade deadline. So this week it's going to be mostly all about that and just kind of going over all of the trades, or not all the trades. There are some that I didn't go over. There are some minor trades that I didn't really talk about. But for the most part, every major trade that occurred this past week for the NBA trade deadline, I will be going into. I'll be giving my grades. I'll be giving my thoughts on it. And I'll just be kind of giving a little bit of predictions for things like that. So, again, this week is going to be a little bit different than usual. And I'm very excited to be able to bring this to you. I know I said at the, if you guys did see the first podcast, I said that, things might be different for certain weeks depending on what's going on. If certain videos might not be able to have the same exact, layout that it would normally have, and this is one of those weeks, and I'm very excited to bring it to you. However, I will say this probably will be a little bit longer than usual because there's a lot more stuff to get into. This is a very active trade deadline this year. I'm not only going to be speaking about the trade deadline, however, I am going to be talking about the Super Bowl, and I'm also going to be talking about the updates for the MLB Lockout. So, obviously, it's not all basketball, so my baseball and my football people, you do have something to hold on to here. But I just wanted to talk to you guys about that really quickly before I got into the video. And so now, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl first. So, obviously, this past Sunday was Super Bowl 56, and it was a really good game. This past postseason for football has really been awesome. I mean, they're the first week, the wild card week, in division week even had, some really kind of stinkers. They had some games where, it was really not all that great. Some blowouts here and there, but for the most part, from the championship week on, and even some in the divisional week, there have been a lot of really good games in a row, and the Super Bowl was no exception. We're definitely ending the year on a high note. This game was back and forth the entire time. I honestly, I really had no idea who was going to win the whole game. It really could have gone either way. It wasn't necessarily a shootout, but it wasn't really a defensive battle either. It was kind of that game that was right in the middle. Sometimes it felt like a shootout. Sometimes it felt like it was a defensive battle. So it was a really, really good game in terms of that. I think it had a little bit for everybody. But the Bengals, they did end up going down to the Rams. So the Rams win the Super Bowl 23-20 was your final score. And anyone who watched this game, again, would probably tell you that it was so back and forth that either team could win it. And really both teams deserved to win it. And the Bengals definitely, they showed that they deserved to be there. I know a lot of people, the popular betting pick was probably the Bengals. They were the underdog, and obviously they've been the underdog pretty much every game in the postseason this year. So certainly it was a popular choice to pick them this weekend with them being the underdog again. But, they showed up. They showed why they deserve to be there. Their defense played great pretty much all day, and I have to give them credit. The offensive line played really well, for about the first 2.5 quarters. Joe Burrow, obviously, he showed up. Really young quarterback. Obviously he's played in some big games, played in the national championship game, obviously, for LSU when he was in college. But, you never really know how young quarterbacks are going to respond to the pressure like this. But Joe Burrow responded really well. He was efficient. He didn't turn the ball over. He pretty much did everything that he could to win the game for his team. But the Rams, in the end, they were just too much. And, I feel like this game probably could have been more of a blowout than it ended up being. And the reason for that is obviously because, or at least one of the reasons for that, is obviously Odell Beckham Jr. Apparently tearing his ACL now. That story came out earlier today. We didn't obviously know last night what his injury was, but tearing his ACL supposedly in the second quarter of that game. He had already had a couple of catches, already had a touchdown at that point. He was really starting to exploit the Cincinnati defense. It was 13-3. Or 13-3. They did miss the extra point there on that second touchdown. But it was 13-3 at one point in favor of the Rams. So it was starting to kind of look like, if the Bengals offense didn't, really turn things around, the Bengals defense wasn't going to be able to hang. But that didn't happen, obviously, with the OBJ injury. The Rams, their offense suffered mightily because of it. The Bengals really did a great job after that injury. They kind of changed game plans. You could kind of see that, they weren't really rushing a lot of pass rushers. They were kind of dropping back into very, very heavy zone coverages, trying to kind of, stop Cooper Kupp from really taking over the game. And it was going to really be up to guys like Odell Beckham Jr. to kind of get open and take over because they weren't going to really let Cooper Kupp do that. But once Odell Beckham Jr. really left, they were able to rush the passer more, go a little bit easier on their coverages on the back end, and really focus on stopping the run game. And that change in their defensive plan really, really helped the Bengals throughout the second half to keep it close and come back in the game. And the Bengals, they essentially, once OBJ went down, they dared, guys like Ben Skoranek, guys like Van Jefferson, and, any of the other, quite honestly, lackluster weapons that the Rams had to beat them, because they were going to double, they were going to triple Cooper Kupp. That's just what they were going to do. He's the Triple Crown winner. Of course you're going to do that. Tyler Higbee, their second leading receiver for the Rams, their tight end, was not available for this game. So basically, they dared all these other guys to beat them, and for the most part, they didn't really beat them. The Bengals, they shut down the run. Like I said, they were able to focus more on shutting down the run. And they did. They shut down the run. The running game for the Rams was absolutely useless. I'm going to be honest with you. Nobody really stepped up for the Rams. I think the Bengals' game plan really did work. I know the final score may not show that, but it really worked. The Bengals' defense has surprised me all throughout the playoffs. They have played so well. By the numbers, they're not that great of a defense. On paper, they don't really have a lot of big stars or anything like that, but they've played really well all postseason long, so they really stepped up in this game. Although I will say I'm sure it was a lot easier without OBJ, but when it came down to it, when nobody was really stepping up for the Rams, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp just said, all right, we're just going to do it ourselves. Even though Cooper Kupp was getting double teamed and triple teamed, like I said, Matthew Stafford threw it to him anyway, which with his time with Calvin Johnson in Detroit, I'm sure he was very used to. He's triple covered. I don't care. I don't have anybody else. So I'm sure Matthew Stafford felt right at home. And you know what? It worked. And Kupp scored the game-winning touchdown with about 1:30 left in the game. Ended up winning Super Bowl MVP. The Bengals couldn't get it going, and that was all she wrote. And, so big congrats to the Rams. Big congrats to Aaron Donald, Odell Beckham Jr., Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Andrew Whitworth, all these amazing players that really deserved this Super Bowl, deserved that victory. Guys that have waited their whole careers to finally hold that Lombardi trophy in their hands. I just couldn't be happier for them. And also, by the way, safety for the Rams, Taylor Rapp, also proposed to his girlfriend after the game. So that's really cool. Congrats to them. But obviously, I honestly, I just couldn't be happier for Matthew Stafford. Seeing him win a Super Bowl after everything he went through in Detroit, it was honestly a little emotional for me. Like, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I was fighting back tears a little bit when he was getting interviewed right after the game, and me just kind of fully realizing, like, oh, he did finally win the Super Bowl. And, I know it's like, why is it that emotional? And it's because Matthew Stafford, honestly, he's been one of my favorite players in the NFL for years. I mean, I thought that he was a great quarterback in Detroit, and he just, there were down years, obviously, for him in terms of his statistics and everything, but I thought that when he had a decent enough team, he was able to, bring them over the top and, get them to the playoffs and everything like that. And, it's just been really sad and tough seeing him kind of go through this point in his career where nobody really believed in him, and everybody thought that, not everybody, but a lot of people thought that it was his fault that the Detroit Lions didn't have that much success. And it was really sad. And I went to a Pro Football Hall of Fame museum in Myrtle Beach a little while ago, and they actually, I don't know if any of you guys remember this game, but there was a game back at, I think, oh man, maybe like 2012. I can't remember exactly when this game was, but it was earlier in Matthew Stafford's career. He was playing the Browns, and he actually got his jersey torn in half on a sack, or not on a sack, but on an attempted sack, and he threw the game-winning touchdown pass anyway, and he also had a separated left shoulder, and he just played through it the whole, for a couple of plays or whatever it was. And you literally could see him after the game running off the field with, like, his left arm, like, down and hanging, and he's, like, hanging on to it, and he's like, oh, my God, he's so tough. He works incredibly hard, and I was just so happy to see him finally win one. That really, honestly, again, it made me a little bit emotional. Rumors are swirling, just kind of shift focus here. Rumors are swirling that Aaron Donald may retire after this season now. And, I guess selfishly as a fan, I don't really want to see him retire. But, I mean, there is really nothing left for him to prove at this point. 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He's been probably the best defensive player in football for a decade. Now he's a Super Bowl champion. There's really nothing left for him to prove. And to me, he's already a first ballot Hall of Famer. Especially with now a Super Bowl. So we'll see if he does end up retiring. Obviously, it would be sad as a fan to see him go, but obviously, that would be up to him and his family, of course, and we would wish him nothing but the best. But I'll say this, though. Imagine this Rams team next year. I mean, this Rams team is going to be really tough to stop next year, because you can imagine the team right now, right? Let's say that Aaron Donald doesn't retire, just for fun's sake, right? And OBJ, especially now with this injury, I think it's feasible to think that he would probably have to sign another one-year contract so that he can kind of reprove that he's healthy and everything, and I think that it makes sense for him to do that with the Rams already. So let's say he comes back, and even if he's not available for the first few games, he probably would end up being available for most of the season, given the timelines and everything like that for tearing your ACL these days. But imagine that these weapons already, with a healthy Tyler Higbee, with a healthy Robert Woods, and a healthy Tutu Atwell, who they drafted pretty high up in last year's draft, that was pretty much injured the whole year. And he was going to be, pretty heavily utilized in this offense before he got injured. So imagine all those weapons. Obviously, you'd still have the Triple Crown winner in Cooper Kupp. I don't know how you stop that offense at this point. So it's going to be a tough team to watch. And, for the Bengals, they showed that they deserved to be there. They showed that it wasn't a fluke that they got there, that they were among the best teams in the NFL. It's hard to ask your defense to play as well, or at least to play better, I would say, than the Bengals defense did last night, especially against the Rams and their great offense and the great quarterback and everything like that. But again, I keep coming back to this. I said earlier that the offensive line played well for the first 2.5 quarters. And it's true, they did play well for the first 2.5 quarters, but man, the last quarter and a half, it was absolutely brutal. Joe Burrow was sacked 7 times in the Super Bowl. That is tying now a Super Bowl record for the most sacks given up in the Super Bowl. But what was worse than that, definitely to me, I think that it's because Joe Burrow was sacked 6 times from the about midway through the third quarter mark on. He was sacked 6 different times. And honestly, anyone who watched this game, you could be the judge, but honestly, if you think that those sacks didn't affect the Bengals and their game plan and the momentum of the game, then I think you're just lying to yourself. I mean, I do. And by the way, also on the last play of the game, Aaron Donald had Joe Burrow about 8 inches from getting thrown to the ground, and Joe Burrow just kind of happened to shovel the pass off. But if that had been a sack, that would have been the 8th sack of the game, the 7th sack from about the halfway point through the third quarter on, and it would have broken the record for most sacks given up in a Super Bowl. Like, these are not things that are flukes. This is a consistent underperformance of a very bad offensive line. And I think that this game really is a reminder that the Bengals, their rebuild is not complete right now. They really, really, really need to get some better offensive linemen to protect Joe Burrow. And, in terms of the game itself, they honestly had 2 big plays the whole game. They had a 46-yard catch from Jamar Chase, and they had a 75-yard touchdown catch by T. Higgins, which honestly, you could make the argument that shouldn't even have counted because he grabbed Jalen Ramsey's face mask and threw him to the ground before eventually catching the ball and running it all the way to the end zone. So you can argue that one shouldn't even have counted. Now, obviously, there's arguments to say that it should have counted, but you can argue that it shouldn't have counted because obviously you're not supposed to grab another player's face mask. So there were 2 big plays on offense the whole day. And obviously, Joe Mixon threw a touchdown pass, which was fun. That was obviously really cool to see. But, for the most part, let's just say even 3. Let's count that as a big play. It was 3 big plays on offense the entire game. So, the Bengals offense wasn't really able to get going. And in large part, it was because the offensive line was not able to protect Joe Burrow consistently. Joe Mixon had a couple of nice runs. And again, also had that touchdown pass. But, again, the Bengals really just couldn't get it going on offense. And, again, I think this game's a reminder that, the Bengals still have a lot of work to do. They still have a lot to kind of build for their team. I think they really have, again, a lot of positions that they need to improve upon for them to really be, among that top echelon of team consistently. Clearly they need a lot of offensive line help. They need some secondary help. Obviously the secondary played well throughout the playoffs, but Chidobe Awuzie, Eli Apple, and Mike Hilton they're just not going to get it done against, top of the line receivers for years and years to come. It's just they got to get better with that. And they probably could use another pass rusher alongside Trey Hendrickson because other than Trey Hendrickson, they don't really have much of a pass rush other than a couple of guys, might get a sack here or there. But, there's not really enough consistent pass rush other than from Trey Hendrickson. And also, I think Jesse Bates, their Pro Bowl safety, I think he's also a free agent at the end of this year, if I'm not mistaken. So if he walks, what are you going to do then? Are you willing to spend $50 million to keep him around? Because if you're not, obviously he's going to walk. So then what do you do? Now you need more secondary than you would have needed otherwise. So, obviously the Bengals still have a lot of work to do, but it's been a magical season for them. You gotta think about this. Like, for the last 2 seasons before this one, the Bengals had 6 total wins. And now this year they went to the Super Bowl. Like, it's, again, magical season. And it's been awesome to watch, and I hope they can get back to these heights in the years to come because they are fun. They are a really, really fun team to watch. Joe Burrow is fun to watch. Jamar Chase is fun to watch. Their offense is really, really fun. And Zach Taylor is a great, great, great coach. This is the first time that the 2 youngest coaches in the NFL actually made the Super Bowl. I also think it might have been the first time that the 2 youngest coaches faced off against one another in the playoffs at all. Never mind the Super Bowl. So super cool. But, obviously, again, I really hope that the Bengals can get back to these heights. But for the love of God, please get some more offensive line help. Please. I'm willing to admit it, okay? I was wrong this past draft. Jamar Chase was your guy. I get it. I was wrong. I am admitting it right here. But you don't have that excuse this year. You don't have it. You have a great tight end. You have 3 great wide receivers. You have a great running back. You have a decent defensive line, especially stopping the run. You know, with your first round pick this year, you have to go offensive line. You know, you have to go offensive line. And if you don't go offensive line in the first round, you've got to go offensive line with your second, your third, your fourth. You have to be able to draft at least 2 or 3 offensive linemen in your draft this year. You know, like unless you know you get to, you know, pick 31, which I think is what pick the Bengals would have, and there's somebody there you just can't pass up that fell. You know, a top 10 or a top 15 prospect that fell all the way to you at 31. Like, if you do that, then, you know, I understand, but still, like, you got to be able to get offensive line. You don't have the I need some more explosiveness on offense excuse this year. Please, for the love of God, protect Joe Burrow, because if you don't, he won't make it to 30. He'll be the next Andrew Luck, and none of us want that, because Joe Burrow is fantastic. So, all right. With that, I'm going to move on to the MLB Lockout and just kind of talking about what's been going on this week. There have been some updates since the last time I spoke about it on this podcast. The owners and the MLBPA met this past Saturday, and the MLB presented their new proposal to the players. And, you know, before I get into that, I do want to say this. You know, I think Rob Manfred made a mistake. And I think the mistake that he made this past week was stepping up to the podium and claiming that, you know, this deal was going to be the one. Like this, you know, they've worked really hard on this deal, and this was going to be the one. Now, I love the confidence, obviously, of Rob Manfred in that. And, you know, in a lot of ways, I can kind of agree with that sentiment. I can agree with some of the stuff that he said about that because, you know, he said something along the lines of, you know, you have to be confident in what you're presenting or things are never going to get done. And I can agree with that sentiment. I do think you need to be confident in what you're doing. And, you know, I think, but here's the problem. I think that, all right, you know what? Let me just say this. I'm going to be honest with you here because I'm going to go over absolutely everything that I know about what the MLB offered. And, you know, I'm always going to give my honest opinion, as I've said many times on this podcast. But I just think that Manfred should have really read this and really read the room and understood what was going on before he gave this proposal and before he said this was going to be the one. And you're going to see what I'm talking about in a second. So, okay, first things first, there is a lot to like about what the MLB proposed here. I'm going to be honest. There is a lot to like, and there's some stuff that I really think that both sides can build off of here. You know, up to this point, there are a lot of things that the players have addressed that the owners didn't really address in their previous deals. And in this proposal, most, if not all of those things got addressed. So that's obviously great. So I wanted to try and quickly summarize the main points of the deal, what MLB proposed, what they tweaked, and also the new stuff that they added in there. So obviously it would be very difficult for me to just kind of read them and you guys not be able to kind of follow along. So I'm going to provide a little bit of visual aid here for you guys so that it'll be a little bit easier to follow and you can kind of make your own judgments based on kind of what they sound like and what they look like. So here is, again, the list of what the MLB has proposed in their latest proposal. Okay. They proposed to increase the bonus pool for pre-arbitration players from $10 million to $15 million. And throughout this process, the MLBPA has been seeking roughly $100 million to be put into that pool. So the owners offering $15 million, up from $10 million in their previous deals. They also offered to increase the minimum salary to $630,000 flat, with the opportunity for teams to pay even more if they want to through incentive bonuses and stuff like that. Or, so these are two separate things that they proposed, or a tiered set salary of $615,000 for players with 0 to 1 years of service time, $650,000 for 1 to 2 years, and $725,000 for people with 2 to 3 years of service time. Now, before, the MLB previously offered a tiered set that was about $700,000 at 2 to 3 years. So the MLBPA is seeking about a $775,000 minimum salary across the board. They don't want it to just be in the second and third year. They want it to be across the board by comparison. MLB offered to increase the competitive balance tax threshold to $214 million, $214 million, $216, $218, and $222 throughout the next 5 years. So that's kind of how the competitive tax would threshold would kind of set up throughout the next 5 seasons. So it would start out at $214 in year 1, and then go to $214 the next year, $216, $218, $222. Before, it was the same kind of deal, except the third year stayed at $214, the fourth year was $216, and the fifth year was $220. So they're just kind of tweaking years 3 through 5, bringing it up about $2 million. But the next one kind of is or not the next one, but there is something in here, and I'm not sure that I actually put it in the actual list here, but they are also trying to penalize teams with draft picks. So they are taking draft picks away from teams that go over the tax threshold, or there is a second tax threshold, right? So right now, let's say that it's the competitive tax threshold is 214. The second tax threshold would be 234. So if a team is paying more than $234 million in salary, that's going over the second tax threshold. If a team does that, then you will be punished with draft picks. Now, currently the MLB does not do that. They only punish by, fining teams, or, kind of doing like a tax multiplier. Like if you go over by 20 million, you're actually going to end up paying 60 million, or whatever the case may be. So, I'm not really sure if that is in here, but I just kind of wanted to make that clear before I forgot, just in case it isn't. It might be, but we will see. So next thing, the teams will receive 2 draft picks if a star prospect finishes in the top 3 of a major award voting in multiple years, as a way to disincentivize or de-incentivize. Excuse me, that's a typo right there. Sorry about that. To de-incentivize service time manipulation. The MLBPA proposed, what they proposed was service time bonuses, and I'm not really sure that that's going to end up happening, but that's kind of, the 2 draft picks to teams if guys finish in the top 3 for awards, even if you are not eligible for arbitration just yet. So also, the league made concessions to the union by withdrawing its proposal to require clubs over the base tax threshold to forfeit draft picks. So this is exactly what I talked about earlier. So only teams surpassing the $234 million threshold would be subject to draft picks. So before, they were going to raise the tax threshold, but they were also going to raise the punishments for going over the tax threshold, which the players definitely do not want. So what they would do is they would surpass, if they did surpass the $234 million threshold, they'd forfeit second-round picks, and then if you pass the $254 million tax threshold, you would lose a first-round pick. So obviously this is not something that the MLB has done before, so they are adding this extra punishment to this proposal. The MLB also wants to eliminate recidivism, which basically what it is it tries to create more year-to-year consistency in both team payrolls and the competitive balance. So what that basically means is that in previous years, what teams would be able to do is, let's say, you're the New York Yankees, and you are competing every year for the World Series. And hopefully, because you're the Yankees, you're not winning it. But you're trying to win it every year, and so you're spending a lot of money because you're the Yankees. And 2 or 3 years into this, you go, oh man, you know what? We're spending a lot of money on these contracts, and we're not going anywhere, and I'm paying a crazy amount of taxes for going over the luxury tax. I'm going to reset. And what you could do is you could then have 1 year where you go back down under the luxury tax, and then immediately the next year jump back up, and the taxes would be completely wiped. Now, the MLB is proposing to eliminate that as a way of kind of, stopping teams from, cutting payroll and not spending money in an offseason. So they're basically just trying to further incentivize teams to spend more money on players, which is always a good thing. And also, the last thing I have here is that the MLB also added new incentives for Rule 4 players, such as increased bonus values and international draft slots, as well as a proposal that players who are drafted after submitting to a pre-draft physical must be offered at least 75% of that slot value in their contract, and they will not be allowed to be failed and have their contract be void if they fail a post-draft physical. So think about Kumar Rocker this past draft. He took a pre-draft physical, passed the pre-draft physical, got drafted, I believe, 10th overall to the Mets. I could be wrong on the specific number, but very early in the first round. I do believe it was 10th, though. And then failed his post-draft physical. The Mets refused to sign him. He didn't get paid any money. And honestly, I don't really know what's going on with him nowadays. He might be in Japan. I don't know what's going on with him. He might go back to college. I have no idea. So whatever the case is, he got kind of not screwed necessarily, but I mean, you could say he got screwed out of a contract right there. And the MLB is kind of offering an incentive for the players kind of have this deal where it's like, hey, we're not going to do that anymore. Even if, as long as you pass the pre-draft physical, your contract can't be null and void if you fail the post-draft physical. So that's just a kind of a throw in there. So, okay. I know that that's a lot to unpack. That's a lot of stuff. And hopefully that visual kind of helps. So you guys can kind of take some time as I'm speaking to kind of look through it and kind of fully understand it as I go along. But, I'm going to give my take on what I like and what I don't like here to the best of my ability. Hopefully you guys can kind of, stay with me here. Again, I know it is a lot. It's a lot for me too. Trust me. Reading this, at 1 o'clock in the morning, trying to do research for this, it's not easy. So, trying to understand it all, watching videos on it, watching MLB Network, reading articles, it is a lot to unpack. So I'm going to try my best here to unpack it as best I can. So I think I'm going to start with the minimum salary stuff that we talked about. So I think that, both are actually pretty reasonably okay, especially, I didn't particularly like the first one at first, but then I realized that with the first one, teams can actually, with their own discretion, pay more money if a player performs well. Now, I like it a little better with that. I'm not sure I trust owners to still do that. I still think that most owners, even if, you have a guy like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who's just absolutely raking, in their first, second, third year in the league, I don't think that they're going to give them much of a bump in pay, especially if they have to stay with that team. It's not like they can be released into free agency or anything unless the organization releases them. So, I'm not sure I trust owners to pay more money in that case. But, in principle, I suppose it's fine. But I really like the second proposal, which is the tiered salary set that we talked about earlier. So the $615 for $615,000 for players 0 to 1 years, $650 for players from years 1 to 2, and then $725 for years 2 to 3. I think that there's something there. I think that really, the MLB PA, I think that they could probably accept that. Now, again, can the owners kind of go up a little bit, maybe go to, 625, 675, 750. Can you do that maybe? I think that if the MLB owners did that, I think the players would accept it. No problem. I think that they'd accept it right away. But I really like that kind of tiered structure. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think the MLBPA, that's something that the MLBPA can go along with. And I think same general kind of idea for the competitive balance tax stuff I talked about earlier. I talked about the $214 million for the first 2 years, then $216, $218, $222, that whole thing. I think that, I think the owners could, they should go up a little bit with that as well. Maybe go, 216, 216, 220, 224, 230, like go up just a little bit more. And, I think that you'd be able to get it done. And maybe you don't even have to go up that much. Maybe you just go up another $2 million on each, whatever the case may be. And I think that's something that the players can get behind. I also think that there are things that the MLBPA should just accept outright without any kind of adjustments. I think that the Rule 4 player bonus and physical stuff the last thing I talked about, I think the MLB players would have no problem with that. I think they should accept that outright as well. I think the proposal to eliminate recidivism, which is obviously, when you can go under the salary tax for a year and then, not have to worry about it, kind of affecting you in terms of taxes and stuff like that. I think the MLBPA could accept that right away and not really have an issue. I think that really could help out players that hit free agency, especially, so I think the players could get behind that. However, with all of that, I think that there's a lot of stuff that the owners got wrong in this proposal. Now, I do want to say this before I continue. I think a lot of what I've said has been very critical of the owners, and I think rightfully so given these circumstances, but, there are stuff that the players are holding out for that I don't agree with. I think that the players are being a little harsh or a little, crazy with certain things that they're wanting that they're never going to get. But I think for the most part, in this particular negotiation process, this particular work stoppage has really been driven by the owners and their weird proposals and not negotiating properly. And I hearken back to what Rob Manfred said about this particular proposal where, he thought this was going to be the one. He thought this was really going to be the proposal that was going to bring it home. And I'll say again, there's a lot of stuff to like here. There's a lot of good things to build on, but did he read it? Did he read the full thing? Because I'm going to be honest with you. I've said time and time again that, there are there's stuff in this proposal and in past proposals that I just look at and go, what are you doing? Come on, this is ridiculous. And, again, like I said, there's some stuff that the players have to give up on, decreasing revenue sharing. That's what comes to mind immediately for me. The owners are never going to go with that. You gotta be able to back down on that kind of stuff. But again, there are just some things in here that I look at and I laugh. I laugh at the fact that Rob Manfred and the owners genuinely think that these things are going to be accepted. I don't understand how they got to that point. So, all right. So, I talked a little bit earlier about the pre-arbitration pool, right? That's what comes to mind really when I think of stuff that I laugh at. You thought this was going to be the end-all be-all, right? Players want $100 million in the bonus pool. You offered 10. So in your next proposal, you up it to 15 and you think, yeah, that's going to be the one, that they're going to accept it. No, what do you mean? That's not a compromise. That's you taking a knight on the chessboard and moving it over one piece. Or one space, whatever. You're not doing anything with that, and the players are not going to accept that. So, $15 million is obviously a little bit more than 10, and it's a little bit better, but it's just not going to get it done. Think about it this way. There are 30 teams in the MLB right now. So, if you put $15 million into this pool, and you do $15 million divided by 30, because I'm assuming that every team is going to pay an equal amount to put into this pool. That's my guess. I could be wrong, but that's my guess. And so let's just say that that's the case. Every team's going to have to put a certain amount of money that's spread out across the league into this pool for arbitration every year. That means if you do $15 million divided by 30, that is $500,000. So that means every team is only going to pay $500,000 into this pool. That is less money than the MLB team would have to pay if they were to call up one of their minor leaguers on a minor league contract to the major leagues and put them on a major league contract. That is less money than if you called up one minor leaguer to the majors. So that's just not going to get it done. Now, again, I think that it's, I guess, progress. But, I mean, in this case, I don't even know if it really is progress because, again, you know, if every team paid an equal amount, it would equal to about $500,000. And that math stays exactly the same when you factor in that MLB only wants to reward the top 30 players in that pre-arbitration category in terms of WAR, wins above replacement. So you're only going to be paying out these bonuses to 30 players every year, which means on average, these players' bonuses are going to be $500,000, which is less than what they're already making. So yeah, it is a bump in pay. I guess that's nice, but $15 million just is not going to do it. It's not enough. Juan Soto, Vlad Jr., Rafael Devers, there are so many others, Corbin Burns, these guys are worth way more than what would end up being $1 million for their team in a year. They just are. Like, they're worth way more money than that per year. And they're way more valuable to their teams than that pay would give you. So, to further prove my point that $15 million is not going to be enough, I did some math for you guys. I did some quick maths, and I wanted to show you guys exactly what math I was able to do. So, the average MLB salary per year, factoring in everybody who's making minimum and all the 30, 35, $40 million contracts, everybody right now is about $4.8 million. So I think it's fair. Let's round up to $5 million. Let's just round up to $5 million for simplicity's sake. I think that's fair, right? So let's say that you wanted to make the argument that, you know, for a guy who's pre-arbitration, if he leads the pre-arbitration guys in WAR for a year. So let's say it's Juan Soto. Juan Soto goes out there, hits 45 home runs, hits 335, has a 490 on base percentage, just a crazy year, has like a 7 WAR, whatever the case is. He leads the pre-arbitration guys in WAR. And you say, you know what? You are well above average in terms of a player. So we're going to give you the bonus of what an average MLB player makes, which is $5 million. You can make that argument, right? I think that's not a leap to make in terms of an argument. So let's say every year you pay the number one guy for WAR $5 million. Okay, let's start there. And then the second highest WAR person in terms of this. So this is now factoring into, you know, the MLB wanting to only pay the top 30 guys in WAR for this arbitration pool. So that's kind of what I'm going over here, just in case anybody's lost with that. So you pay the first guy $5 million. You pay the next guy 2.5. You pay the third guy 1.5 million. You pay the fourth guy 1.25 million. And you pay the last guy the fifth guy $1 million. So your top 5 go from 5 million to 2.5 million to to 1.5 million to 1.25 million to 1 million. That's your top 5. And then your 6 through 30 guys only get that $500,000 bonus. So that's what I'm doing. So that's your 30. That's how much you're paying. I think that's a reasonable amount to pay each year for these guys that are really raking or shoving, depending on if you're a hitter or a pitcher. And here is what the total comes out to. If you guys can see that there, that is your total. If you can see that, I don't know why this camera is not focusing here. Let me see. There we go. All right. So that is what it comes out to. That is the math. So that is a very reasonable kind of equation to use. And it comes out to almost $24 million. So paying one guy the average, and then all the other guys way below average, by the way, and you still come out to way more money in this arbitration pool than what the owners are offering. Now, I'm not saying that they should put $100 million in there. I don't think they should put $100 million in there because that's every single year. That's a lot of money to put in there. But $15 million is just not going to do it. So I also did another equation for you guys. This is what I think should happen. So let's say you stay with the argument that I just said of you want to pay the number one guy $5 million. All right, let's just tweak the numbers just a little bit. I think this makes a lot more sense than paying just the $500,000 for the rest of the guys. I think this one makes a lot more sense. And see if you guys agree with me. So stay with paying $5 million for the number one war guy for these arbitration players in the arbitration pool. Your number two guy gets a $3 million bonus. Your number three guy gets a $2.5 million bonus. Your number four guy gets a $2 million bonus, and your number five guy gets $1.5 million. So you're bumping up every salary underneath the $5 million. And then instead of all the rest of the guys getting $500,000, they will all get $1 million instead of $500,000. That's a lot more money for all these guys. I think that's honestly fair. I think that's much more fair than what the MLB is proposing. And I did that math for you guys. And here is what it comes out to. Now, I know that it's kind of hard to see that I did do the math there, and this camera is absolutely killing me in terms of not focusing. There we go. Okay. So you can see that that's the math right there. So 5 million, 3 million, 2.5, 2 million, 1.5, and then the 1 million is, of course, times 25, and that comes out to $39 million. And I think if you listen to any YouTuber or read any article that is kind of talking about what a compromise could be in terms of this, I think that a lot of them would agree that $40 million is good enough. I think that that is a completely fair proposal right there that benefits both sides. And if you're sitting there going, the MLB owners would never want that, they'd be paying too much money. If you put $40 million into this pool, that still means that each team's only paying about $1.3 million per year to keep this pool open. So it's not going to break anybody's bank, or at least it shouldn't. Now, I'm sure some of the small market teams might want to complain that we're a small market, we don't have that kind of money, extra money to pay. Well, you know what? That's fine. If that's the case, then I highly doubt that the Dodgers, Yankees, Red Sox, Giants, Phillies, Braves, Angels, I don't think any of them are really, I don't think they have anything better to do with their money than that. So I'm sure they'd be willing to help. Maybe my math is flawed here. I think that those are fair proposals, and I really think the goal of the first one was to kind of show you how small the MLB offer was. Like, even if you paid like barely any bonuses for these guys, for the top 30, you're still paying way more than what the MLB is willing to put into this bonus pool. And the second one was obviously to show you what I think a fair proposal for these players would be. Now, you can feel free to agree or disagree down in the comments below. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that, as I say all the time. But again, I just think that seeing those numbers helps kind of demonstrate how ridiculous that $15 million offer that the owner presented was. Now, draft picks, the draft pick stuff that we talked about earlier in terms of, teams that, bring players up for service time and they end up, getting into the top 3 in terms of voting for awards and stuff like that, they'll get draft picks. I think that helps, but I think mostly that's going to be for de-incentivizing teams and owners from manipulating service time. I'm not sure how much that's going to correlate with kind of additional bonuses for players, but I do think it helps. I know that the players kind of want service bonuses. I think that would help in terms of salary and stuff like that, but I don't think the owners are ever going to go along with that. And so all that being said, there is good progress here. There is good stuff and stuff to like about what the owners proposed. But the players obviously, I'm sure that you guys have figured this out by now. The players obviously declined this offer from the MLB. They were completely unimpressed with it. Especially again with Rob Manfred saying like, this is gonna be the one, and it wasn't. So I think that there's more to be done. There just has to be more, and people have to be kind of willing to sit in the room and deal with this. And what irks me the most about this whole process so far is that it seems like, there's no negotiation going on other than what the MLB proposes and then the MLB players really saying no. Like, it feels like the owners show up into this room with the MLBPA and their president and their committee and whatnot, and they go, all right, here's your proposal. And the MLB players look through it and they're like, no, we want more of this, we want more of this, we want more of this, we want more of this. And the MLB owner just takes the proposal away and goes, okay, I'll see you in a week. Like, listen, that stuff's all well and good in December, but we're in mid-February now. That stuff's not going to fly anymore. You have got to sit down and you have got to negotiate. Players can't do anything about owners leaving these meetings. They're powerless in this scenario. They can't come to work. They can't get paid. They can't make proposals themselves. They can't write all these proposals themselves. It has to be the owners. So the players are just powerless. And, there's no negotiations going on. The players are at complete mercy of what the owners are doing and the owners' timeline. Guys, we are getting dangerously close to canceling spring training, or at the very least, delaying spring training, if not canceling it, as I said earlier. And we might even be missing regular season games at this point if things don't get solved quickly. And the MLB owners don't seem to have any kind of sense of urgency. And, these things of, okay, we're going to show up, we're going to give you an ultimatum, and if you don't take it, we're going to leave. Like, you cannot, there has to be actual negotiation. There can't be any more of these take it or leave it ultimatums with these owners. That time is gone. Things are getting really, really out of hand now. The owners need to be able to come to the table with a plan, and they need to be willing to be at that table for hours, even days at this point. Because, again, we're in mid-February. We could be missing actual regular season games, which Rob Manfred himself said it would be disastrous for the MLB. I don't even know if he agrees with that anymore because they have no sense of urgency. Right now, that meeting was Saturday. I'm recording this on the next Monday. There are currently, at least from what I've read, no plans on when or where these, the extra negotiations are going to take place. It could be a week from now. It could be 2 weeks from now. It could be tomorrow. I don't know when that's going to happen. So there is no sense of urgency at all throughout this whole process by the owners. It took, as I said in a couple podcasts ago, it took 43 days for the MLB to even reach out to the players after the lockout began. Like, there has never been a sense of urgency by these owners to want to get a deal done. And, there hasn't been a single meeting between the MLB and the MLBPA that I have seen. I could be wrong about this, but that I have seen that has lasted more than an hour. This one that just happened on Saturday was less than an hour. The owners showed up. They handed the proposal to the players or to the MLBPA president or whatever the term or title of that person would be. They read through some of it, if not all of it, and went, nope. And they went, okay, we'll see you later. Like, you can't do that. Like, the MLBPA has desperately wanted negotiation. That's why they turned down the third-party arbitrator. Because they've said the most efficient way to get this done is if you, the owners, come to the table and negotiate. And the owners are not doing that. What's killing me more than anything with these negotiations is that there isn't one. There isn't negotiations. Now, again, players need to come to these meetings ready to drop some of the stuff that they know the owners are never going to do. And the owners need to show up to these meetings ready to do whatever it takes to get a deal done. Ready and willing to negotiate their numbers and not just say, okay, we're going to take a week and we're going to barely tweak the numbers. Like, when I read the first article of how this MLB negotiation went on this past Saturday, I saw Rob Manfred say that this was going to be the one, and the first thing I saw was the MLB tweaked its who gives a crap what follows. Tweaked is not this is the end all be all. The end all be all is we made massive overhauls and massive changes to our proposal. That's maybe the end all be all. But you can't just make minor tweaks and go, oh, this is the one. No, that time is over. It is mid-February. Season is going to start in less than a month. We have to get moving. That's the last thing I'll say about it, and I'll keep you guys updated as time goes along. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. All right, now we get on to the exciting part of this video. Like I said, it's probably going to be a little bit of a longer episode this week, so I hope you guys have your popcorn ready, get yourself a drink, whatever you got to do, because we are now here. We are in the trade deadline, and as I said at the beginning of this podcast, things are going to be a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically just going to give grades A through F for both teams in these trades, or if there are more than two teams, which there are a few times here, I'll give grades for all of the teams, whatever the case may be. And I'll also talk about, what this means as we approach the buyout deadline, and if that's relevant for the team or teams at hand. I'll talk about that as well. Now, here's what I will say in terms of the buyout deadline. I know that some people kind of get confused with that kind of stuff. I'm one of them. So, I've had to do some research into that. So, I will say this, the buyout deadline is not until March. So, as of the time of this recording, I have not read anything about any players officially being bought out at this time. So, every player that I talk about that may end up being bought out, it's all speculative. It's all just my kind of idea of what I think might happen if a certain player gets bought out, if they might fit a certain team, although there's not going to be too much of that, I don't think, especially since it is all speculative. But, obviously, what matters in terms of the buyouts is this. So the buyout deadline is March. I believe March 1st is the buyout deadline this year. And what that means is a team and a player can negotiate a player's contract to be bought out, so they'd be paid a specific chunk of their contract up front by this organization, and they would effectively become an unrestricted free agent. Now, if they do get bought out by that deadline of March 1st, and they sign with a team, then they would be eligible, they meaning that player that just got bought out and signed with that team, would be eligible to play for that team in the playoffs should that team make it. Now, if you get bought out after that deadline, you would be ineligible to play for your new team in the playoffs. So let's say, March 5th, John Wall gets bought out by the Houston Rockets. He signs with the Milwaukee Bucks. John Wall would be ineligible to play for the Bucks in the playoffs, which I'm sure nobody in those parties would want if that were to happen. So that's what kind of the buyout stuff, that's what that entails. I think it's pretty straightforward. Again, the confusing part of that, this might be, this is all speculative. So, none of the buyout stuff has occurred yet. So again, this will be all speculatory. So again, when I talk about buyouts, nothing is set in stone in terms of that. I just think that based on what I've read, who is rumored to maybe be bought out, or there may be some reports that have come out that, a person will eventually definitely be bought out, which comes up a couple times here. We'll talk about that. So with that, let's jump right into, the bigger trades of this past week. I will say this, I did not go over every single individual trade. Most of them, I will go over most of them, but there are smaller trades like Torrey Craig for Jalen Smith and a second-round pick. Okay. A bench player for a bench player and a pick. Fine. Whatever. That doesn't really matter. So, although I did just mention it, I guess. But like stuff like that, I didn't go over some of the minor trades that occurred throughout this week. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. All right, no more fooling around. Here we go. First trade. This was, I think, definitely the most blockbuster trade of the week. We're jumping right in. The Brooklyn Nets traded James Harden and Paul Millsap to the Philadelphia 76ers for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 future first-round picks. One of those will be unprotected in 2022, so this upcoming draft, and a protected pick in 2027. I do not know what the protection on that pick is. But honestly, it doesn't really matter at this point. It's just going to be protected some kind of way. And both teams are playoff teams, so, my guess is neither team is going to end up being in the lottery, which is the highest amount of protection you can have is a lottery protected pick. So it's not really going to matter if it's protected. I'm sure either team would get, I'm sure that the Nets are going to be able to keep that pick the way it is. So this trade obviously came as a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, at least for me. I didn't realize the situation had become this dire. As you guys may remember, if you saw the last podcast or one of my clips from last week, I went really in depth on James Harden. I went really in depth on what I thought the rest of the Nets season would look like, and a large portion of that was about James Harden and his down year and what I think he brings to the table for the Nets. I even predicted that the Nets will turn things around and end up winning the championship if they have been able to go through all of this mess and come out on the other side. Within, I think, 2 days of me recording that and putting that out there, it was already completely irrelevant. James Harden wanted out, then James Harden got traded. So it is what it is. Obviously I didn't know how dire the situation was at the time. It's funny to look back on it now. But it is what it is. I really thought that, guys would be able to figure things out. But obviously James Harden wanted out of there. And now we're here. And so the Nets and the 76ers are now, they both get to move on from unideal circumstances. Obviously the Nets with disgruntled James Harden, and obviously the 76ers with Ben Simmons, obviously sitting out this year due to quote-unquote mental health reasons, mostly just because he didn't want to play for them, honestly. And this is a rare instance where, 2 teams in the same division trade superstars. I know that divisions don't mean nearly as much in the NBA as they do in other sports because they go by, their playoff bracket goes by conference, so this year, it's highly possible that every team from the Atlantic Division, which is the Celtics, the Nets, the 76ers, the Knicks, the Raptors, like every single one of those teams will make the playoffs. It's possible that would happen this year. It might not happen, but it is possible that every single one will make the playoffs. Obviously, in football, obviously in baseball, you don't have that. So obviously divisions don't mean as much in the NBA, but they do have to play each other 4 times a year, every year. So there's something to it, I guess. But again, it just still doesn't happen very often. So my instant grades for this. Obviously, these grades will probably change over time. I will give grades that end up looking stupid, I'm sure. But here are my grades right now for the Brooklyn Nets. I'm going to give this a B. So I actually think that the Nets did pretty well in this trade. I think as many issues as Ben Simmons has, he gives them a lot more of what the team needs than James Harden did at this point. The Nets already have KD, so they have, your primary scorer, your number one guy, your guy that can score from anywhere on the floor at any time, basically, literally, again, anytime he wants. And then Kyrie Irving, when he does play, obviously, he only plays about half the games, but, when he's on the court, you now have 2 dynamic scorers. So I think Ben Simmons gives them a lot more defense than what they had. They have a lot more ball facilitation than they had, although James Harden was leading the league in assists. But I think that, the way James Harden assists is a lot different than the way Ben Simmons, moves the ball and everything like that. Plus, again, Brooklyn desperately needed more front line help, like more front court help, and some more shooting around, your stars of KD and your stars of Kyrie Irving. And, they got both of those. They got Andre Drummond, who is an absolute glass cleaner and a good rim defender. You got Seth Curry, not Steph Curry, by the way. Seth Curry, his brother, who is not quite as good of a shooter as Steph is, but he's a fantastic shooter himself. And also they got 2 first-rounders out of the deal to take Ben Simmons and all those guys as well. And, the only reason I don't give them an A is because, obviously I think that the franchise wishes that it had worked out with James Harden, and there are so many what-ifs with this. I mean, they traded 8 first-round picks plus a few really good players for James Harden a year ago. So, on the back, now you just basically handed over 6 first-rounders? Like, that's not great, obviously. You definitely don't ever want to do that, especially with Brooklyn just having gotten all their first-round picks back from the Boston stuff a few years ago. So I think that they probably wish that it had worked out with Harden. So I just can't give them an A because, as much as Simmons and Drummond and Curry and the 2 first-rounders are great, I think that the Nets are really kicking themselves because they gave a lot of their future away for James Harden, and it was just a complete flop, I guess. I mean, you can't really say anything other than that. I mean, he was on the team for a year, and then he left. So, definitely not a risk that ended up working out for them. But, again, in terms of this trade, pretty good, so I'm still going to give it a B. For the 76ers, I'm going to give it a C-. Honestly, maybe even a D+. I'm kind of back and forth on that. I just don't like this trade for them, honestly. I don't think it makes much sense basketball-wise. I don't think it makes much sense morale-wise, although Ben Simmons was pretty bad for your morale, so maybe it does make a little bit of sense morale-wise and team chemistry-wise. But, obviously their record doesn't really scream to me that they're having a lot of chemistry issues as a team. There are guys there that are really developing. I was a huge fan of Tyrese Maxey coming out of the draft. He's really played well this year. So, I don't really see why they felt the need to bring in James Harden, especially with the way that Joel Embiid is playing. James Harden has had a difficult time not being the alpha throughout his career. He's always wanted to be the alpha, and if he goes to the Sixers, which obviously I don't know why I said if, he is going to the Sixers, he's going to have to learn to make Joel Embiid the alpha. Joel Embiid is the alpha of that team, even if James Harden is there. And James Harden's going to have to live with it. And, for the Sixers, again, Harden's making $44 million this year, although they're not going to have to pay all of that. And he's already opted into his $47 million option for next year. He's 30. He's starting to deal with injuries for the first time, really, in his career. And that's obviously never really a good sign for an athlete. His stats are going down, as we talked about last week. And plus, they gave up 2 first-round picks when they were originally asking for a lot of first-round picks for Ben Simmons. So they ended up going from asking for first-rounders to giving them up. And then obviously losing a guy who, I don't know why he keeps getting traded. I know he's not that great on defense, but Seth Curry really does a lot for your offense. He just does. Like, that's just what he does. He comes out there, he stretches the floor, and he stretches out the defense. Like, that's just what he does. And obviously Andre Drummond's a pretty decent big as well. And they just gave up a lot to get a guy that I'm not sure how much he fits with this team. So I don't think it's a great trade for them, but of course we will see as time goes along. On to a few trades that took place earlier in the week. The Cleveland Cavaliers acquired Karis LeVert and a 2020 second-round pick for Ricky Rubio, a lottery-protected first-round pick, and 2 additional second-round picks, one of those being in 2022 and one in 2027. For the Cavs, I'm going to give this grade a, or I'm going to give this, not this grade, excuse me. I'm going to give this trade a B+. I think they got off really, really well in this one. I think the grade would look a lot different. It would be a lot worse if Rubio was not out for the year, because Rubio was really playing well if you guys had watched at all this year before he got injured. I think he was really a big key reason why the Cavs were doing so well throughout this whole year. But I think the Cavs, they did pretty well here. I think Karis LeVert, he still has a chance to be great. He's averaging about 18 points a night this year. He gives the Cavs some additional athleticism, gives them some versatility on both ends of the floor. He's making about $17.5 million this year and next year, I believe, which, admittedly, I think that might mean that Colin Sexton's time in Cleveland is up, which obviously they're very successful without him right now. So, maybe you argue that they don't need him. So, who knows what's going to happen with that. And honestly, I think the cap situation, I think that's what's holding me back from giving them an A here. I think that they really made out well. I think that the Cavs did really well here. Now, I think ESPN gave this trade a C, which I don't know why exactly they gave him the C. I didn't really read too much into it. But honestly, I want to see the Cavs make some noise in the East. So, I'm all for it. I like this trade probably a little bit better than most will like it. But you know what? That's okay. It's just my opinion, right? I can be right and I can be wrong. So we'll see how that goes. And for the Pacers, I also am giving them a B+. I like the value that they got here. I think they're clearly rebuilding, and we'll get into more moves that they made here in just a few seconds. But, again, I do like the pick value for them. They were obviously able to get a first-rounder here. I think B+ is fair for them. I like the value. So B+ is all around in this trade. This is one of those trades where it's good for both teams, and so that's always nice to see. That's the point of trading, right? You want to give up something you don't need and get stuff you do. So that's obviously a great thing. Next up, we have another trade by the Indiana Pacers. This time trading Domantas Sabonis, Jeremy Lamb, Justin Holiday, and a 2027 second-round pick to the Sacramento Kings for Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, and Tristan Thompson. This may be one of the oddest trades I saw all week. That and the Kristaps Porzingis trade that I'll get into a little bit later. For the Kings, the Kings. When I started this podcast, one of the things that I wanted to do during my Tough Talk segments, is one of the things I really want to do is redrafting a franchise. And one of the reasons why I haven't done that yet, obviously other than time constraints and stuff, is because the first teams that I think of, I just don't want to do it. I do not want to try and redraft the Sacramento Kings because there are so many wrong things that the Kings have done over the last 10 years that you sit there and go, how did you screw this up so bad, And honestly, this trade is no exception. I am going to give this one a D-. And they are lucky that I'm not giving them an F. I might even give them an F+. I don't know. D-, F+, who cares? That's what I'm giving them. Again, the only reason I'm not giving this an F is because Domantas Sabonis is young, he's good, he's an all-star. So whenever you can pick up a player like that, you're never going to get an F. But, other than that, this trade is about as bad as it gets. How do you trade Tyrese Maxey? Goodness gracious. Sorry, I was talking about Tyrese Maxey earlier. How do you trade Tyrese Halliburton? I know you have De'Aaron Fox on a long-term contract, and De'Aaron Fox is good, but how do you... I'm going to ask this question 15 times because I don't know how you trade Tyrese Halliburton at this point. Halliburton is averaging 14 and a half points, 7.5 assists, 1.7 steals a game, and is shooting 41% from 3 at 21 years old. I think he may already be better than De'Aaron Fox. I've watched De'Aaron Fox play. I like De'Aaron Fox, but I kind of put him and Devontae Graham in similar categories. Now, obviously, De'Aaron Fox is better than Devontae Graham, but they're kind of empty stat scorer guys. Like, they're kind of like what Monte Ellis was back in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Guys that go out there, put up 18, 20, even more sometimes points per game, but it's just kind of empty stats. They're not doing a whole lot to kind of further the team. They're not doing a lot in terms of making winning plays consistently. And Tyrese Halliburton is the exact opposite. He just seems to make the right play every time. He's not putting up incredible stats. Obviously, 14.5 points is not anything ridiculous. But let's put it this way. I looked up every player at 21 years of age that has averaged 14.5 points per game, 7.5 assists per game, and has shot 41% from three. Everyone that's 21 years old that has done that. I looked it up. And the number of people that have done that is 1. It is Tyrese Halliburton. He's the only one who's ever done this. He is absolutely special. The only one. The only one that's ever done it. Not Kyrie Irving, not Derrick Rose. Nobody that came into the league has done that. Nobody. This guy's going to be a bona fide superstar in 2 years, maybe less. And you just trade him away because you think you might be able to get into the play-in tournament this year? You might be able to steal the 10 seed in the West? I mean, guys, like, it doesn't make any sense. I know Sabonis is very good. I know he's very, very good. I get it. But you just shouldn't trade a good young player like that. And even Buddy Hield, right? You know, he's a good player. He's been on the trading block for like 3 years, so it doesn't really surprise me that he's gone, but like, this is the best that you can get for a package including Buddy Hield and Tyrese Halliburton. Like, you couldn't get a better player than Sabonis? I mean, he's okay. He's an all-star, yeah, but I mean, how much better does he really make your team right now if you're the Kings? I just don't know. I think they're going to be worse because of this. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible trade for the Kings, and I don't know. I'm losing my mind here with the Kings. They drive me nuts sometimes, but it is what it is. They're the Kings. Bad teams stay bad. That's just kind of how it goes. The Kings have been terrible for 20 years. Not 20 years. They've been terrible for 12 years, and they're just going to stay bad. Pacers get an A. I think it's pretty clear with how I'm going with this and how much I love Tyrese Halliburton. You know, 2 really, really good trades for them. They obviously got a B+ for my last one, and now they get an A for this. You know, I think what's really awesome to see is that the Pacers have finally committed to a rebuild. They were kind of in fluctuation and purgatory. They didn't know whether they wanted to be a playoff team and compete for a championship or whether they wanted to rebuild for a couple of years here. And now it looks like they're fully committing to the rebuild, which to me means, you know, guys like TJ Warren, guys like Miles Turner, guys like Malcolm Brogdon even maybe, they'll probably be gone in the next year or two. You know, if you feel like handing the keys to the franchise over to a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, which I think you definitely should, then a guy like Malcolm Brogdon probably needs to go. Miles Turner probably would have been traded at this year's deadline had he not injured his ankle a couple of months ago. So, you know, there's that. And then obviously you got, you know, a decently younger guy like TJ Warren maybe that you can keep around. I don't remember exactly what his contract looked like, but, you know, maybe he could stay, but he might be going too because I feel like you can get a good amount for him. You know, plus, again, you know, Buddy Hield's a good player, and, you know, so that's a nice get. He's a good shooter, good offensive player, but, you know, I think he should honestly be traded in the offseason as well. I just don't think he fits the franchise right now, especially with him. I think he's 29, so he's getting up there. You know, he probably wants to start, you know, competing for a championship, just like, you know, a lot of guys would at this point in their careers. You know, all the other guys, you know, all the other guys that we talked about in terms of getting rid of in this trade, you know, Tristan Thompson, you know, Jeremy Lamb, Justin Holiday, all those other guys are fillers really, so not really going to spend a lot of time on them. And plus, again, you know, like I said, they did get Jalen Smith from the Suns, which I thought was a pretty decent trade and a nice little throw in there. So, great job, Indiana Pacers. You're doing awesome. I have some buddies that are Pacers fans. I'm sure they're loving it right now. They had a great draft this past draft. Now they're rebuilding. They got Jalen Smith, who I think was a top 10 pick a few years ago for the Suns. So, obviously, the Pacers are moving. I think they're really going to be able to get back to being contenders in a few years' time. But right now, they're fully committing to the rebuild, so it's really nice to see them start that. Next up, we have 3 different trades by the Portland Trail Blazers. First, on February 4th, the Blazers traded Norman Powell and Robert Covington to the Los Angeles Clippers for Eric Bledsoe, Justice Winslow, Keon Johnson, and a 2025 second-round pick. So for the Blazers, I'm going to give this a C+. It's not a terrible trade, but it's not a great one either. I guess it gets the job done. I think... you can kind of look at the Blazers and the stuff they did at the deadline, and you can see that they're rebuilding now. They are resetting the franchise. The Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Jusuf Nurkic Blazers were not getting it done. So they are hitting the reset button. Not completely. They're not getting rid of everybody, but they are, they're trying something different here, and we'll get into more in a moment. It's clear now that the goal is to get more cap space and rebuild around Damian Lillard and now Anthony Simons, who I believe they are going to try and re-sign in this offseason. He's really stepped up this year with Lillard and McCollum having, being in and out of the lineup with injuries. Plus, obviously, they're going to want to go after some big free agents in the next year or two, hopefully have some good drafts, get some extra draft picks, and some future resources. I think they're finally kind of going in some kind of direction. Damian Lillard is my second favorite player in the NBA behind Jason Tatum, and he's just so much fun to watch, but he's just kind of been stuck in Portland. And, nothing against Portland itself, but just it felt like the organization wasn't going anywhere. It felt like, they weren't doing really anything to build the roster. Norman Powell was a good signing. He's been pretty good. But obviously now he's been traded in this trade, so it just wasn't really working out. It wasn't working out there. The return package for Powell, he's having a career year this year. It hasn't been great. I don't think that it's a great return package for Powell, especially since Eric Bledsoe is going to be bought out. Winslow and Johnson, they don't really do anything for me, honestly. They both have multiple years left on their contract, so it's not like you can even say, we were just kind of taking money, to kind of, get rid of their contracts next year and have a bunch of cap space. You can't even really say that. This is kind of just a run-of-the-mill, middle-of-the-road trade for me. It gets, you get more cap space. It kind of helps bottom out your roster. But other than that, nothing really special here. So, obviously, Norman Powell's a pretty good player. There's that. So, I'm going to give it a C+. Clippers, I will give an A-. Norman Powell is a really nice player, as I've said a few times. And, you didn't really have to give up too much to get him. And plus, Robert Covington's a pretty versatile defender. He can shoot a little bit. I think it's a really nice trade for the Clippers, especially with, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George being injured for a lot of this year, and they really want to try and make sure that those guys stick around. They still want to go after a championship, even though the Clippers are struggling this year, or at least by comparison to what their expectations were. Powell, great player. Covington, versatile defender, versatile shooter. I think it's a great trade for them. I will say, I think the reason why I'm not giving this a higher grade is because there's now a logjam at the wing position in LA, especially if Leonard and George come back, and those guys are going to be eating up 36 to 40 minutes a night. Because now you're going to have, Morris, you'll have Covington, you'll have Powell, you'll have, who else, who knows who else is there. I'm sure I'm forgetting some people that are very easy to remember, but there's a lot of wings there that there's going to, again, be a logjam there when those two guys come back. But we'll see how it develops. And the Clippers would make some more trades, so, we'll be getting into those here in a minute. So the second trade that the Blazers did, and arguably the biggest, other than the Norman Powell trade, was trading C.J. McCollum, as I talked about earlier. They traded C.J. McCollum, Larry Nance, and Tony Snell to the New Orleans Pelicans for a package that includes Josh Hart, Thomas Satoransky, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Didi Louzada, a protected first-round pick in 2022, and 2 additional second-round picks. So quite a big haul for the Blazers, and I'm going to give this one a B for the Blazers. Another one where there are just, I want to give it an A, but there are just some things that hold it back for me. I think the Blazers, what really holds it back for me is that they immediately parted ways with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, which I'll get to in a little bit here. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a nice young player. And they also did get rid of Satoransky, too, in that same trade that they got rid of Alexander-Walker. So, it lowers my grade because, now basically all you got was, Josh Hart, Didi Louzada, and your picks, which Josh Hart's a good young player. I think he's been playing well this year. I have no idea who Didi Louzada is. Sorry. I have no idea. Just going to be honest with you, but, a decent haul in terms of the picks. So again, it's solid. So again, that's why I'm giving it a B. And I think, if you'd have kept Alexander Walker at least, I think this trade would have gotten at least an A-, if not an A. But since they ended up getting rid of him, I don't think it's fair to give this trade an A, considering that, the reason why I would have given it an A is because I like the potential of Walker, or at least in part because I like the potential of Walker, and he's not even going to be on the team. So I think that's fair. In terms of the Pelicans, I'm going to give it a C. This trade's, it's one of those where you just go, okay, sure. Like, C.J. McCollum, good player. No question about it. I understand why they made this trade. Again, C.J. McCollum, very good player, but I think it's going to hurt them in the long run. They're trying to make the playoffs this year, kind of like the Kings were doing in the first in the trade that I talked about the Kings. So we'll see how it kind of goes. McCollum, he's having a down year this year, and he's been injured on and off. Larry Nance just had surgery and is out for the year, and Tony Snell really hasn't developed much throughout his career. He's pretty much just a throw-in, so they also gave up some pretty good picks. A first rounder and 2 second rounders is not a crazy amount, but you think about the fact that, James Harden got traded for 2 first rounders and a bunch of players. So, that doesn't look quite as good at that. So, I'll be nice and give it a C, I guess. It's not great, not terrible. So there you go. And the last trade that the Blazers made was a doozy. It was a 3-team trade, so, I'm going to do my best to kind of make it easier for you guys. So, to make it easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say what each team received. And then in my grades, I'm going to kind of go over what each team gave up to get the things that they got. So that it's kind of, it all makes sense as to why I gave a team a certain grade and why I gave another team a different grade, whatever the case may be. So here you go. So the Trailblazers received Joe Ingles, Elijah Hughes, and a 2027 second-round pick. The San Antonio Spurs received Thomas Satoransky and a 2022 second-round pick. And the Utah Jazz got Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Juancho Hernangomez. I'll be darned if that's not the best name in the NBA. Juancho Hernangomez, my guy, former Celtic for a couple months, good times. Anyway, so for the Jazz, I am going to give this a B-. And again, just to remind you, the Utah Jazz received Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Juancho Hernangomez. So B- for them, for me. ESPN gave them a C, and then literally immediately proceeded to just logically explain exactly how good the trade was, and then just said like one thing at the very end that was just like, yeah, but I'm going to give it a C. So, it's just stupid. I don't get it, but it is what it is. I don't know how any of that makes sense. So I'm going to give this a higher grade because guess what? It makes sense. It's logical. I understand why they did it. Getting a decent young player for an injury and an expiring contract at the same time in Joe Ingles, who admittedly, when he is healthy, is a very good player. But again, he's injured for the year, so you're not going to get anything out of him this year, and his contract is expired, so if you want to get something out of him, you're going to have to cough up some money for him. I think that is a really, really good job, and also, all the other stuff that you threw in for the Jazz, a relative unknown in Elijah Hughes, and a second rounder. I think that's a pretty darn good trade for them in terms of value. And plus, Juancho's had his moments. He started a whole bunch for the Timberwolves a couple of years ago. He was shooting pretty well for a little while there. So, Juancho's had his moments. You never know. He might be able to find that kind of role for them again. I think, I think that, Juancho, it's fine. Giving him up, that's not, or getting him, that's not something to sneeze at, but it's not super great. I think he might actually be able to play a role for them, but we'll see. So for the Spurs, I'm going to give it a B+. So Jazz B-, Spurs B+. Basically, essentially, they got a second-round pick for taking on $3 million in extra salary, going from Juancho to Thomas Satoransky. So, good for them. The Spurs are not contending this year. They don't plan on contending this year. They are fully committing to the rebuild, and we will see some more trades that they made later on. So, I think definitely, it was really, really good for them. Juancho, honestly, might not have been a really great fit for them in terms of their defensive style of play in San Antonio with Greg Popovich there. He really harkens on defense over everything else. Nice work from them. I'm really impressed with this trade. They did really well. And for the Blazers, I'm going to give it a C+. So, it kind of confuses me a little bit, this trade for the Blazers. Unless they really just didn't see much potential in NAW and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I'm not sure why you do this if you're the Blazers, honestly. You're nowhere near the luxury tax, right? You're rebuilding. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is young. He has potential to develop. So why not give him a shot? I don't know. So this trade's a bit confusing to me again. They got a second rounder and a young development player in Hughes. So I guess why not? But I think that they probably would have been better off just keeping Alexander-Walker. But C+, that's what I'm going to give him. Now on to what was probably the biggest trade in terms of sheer size this past week. This is a 4-team trade, so the last one was a 3-teamer. If you didn't like that, you're really not going to like this in terms of how many kind of moving parts there are here. So in this trade, the Milwaukee Bucks received Serge Ibaka and 2 future second-round picks, as well as some additional cash considerations, which is always nice. The Kings received Dante DiVincenzo, Trey Lyles, and Josh Jackson. The Los Angeles Clippers got Rodney Hood and Semi Ojeleye, and the Detroit Pistons landed Marvin Bagley III. So we'll start with the Bucks here. I'm going to give them a B- for this trade. It's always tough to get rid of a good player like DiVincenzo. And plus Rodney Hood's a decent player, and Semi Ojeleye is a decent kind of 3-and-D kind of guy that can go in there, hit some shots, guard a player, be physical. But you know what? They desperately needed a defensive-minded big man who can shoot. And that's exactly what they got in Serge Ibaka. And plus, 2 second-round picks is, they also got that for their troubles, for Ojeleye and for Hood. I think that's a fair price for both those guys. So, not too shabby in my book. And plus, DiVincenzo's contract is, I think, up after this season. So, you never know. Maybe the Bucks knew the writing on the wall, weren't going to be able to keep him. I think good trade for the Bucks. And I'll tell you what, the Kings, they actually get an A here. I actually really like this trade for the Kings. I know. I think it's the best grade I've given out so far. If not, it's one of the best. It's up there. So I don't know what's going on. The Kings actually made a good trade, at least in my book. Yes. Marvin Bagley has been a bit of a catastrophe for them. And, mostly it's because he's not named Trae Young and he's not named Luka Doncic. both of which who were drafted immediately after Marvin Bagley. One of the many reasons why I said the Kings really don't know how to draft. So, and you know what? I meant to say this in the trade with Tyrese Halliburton, but I'll say it now because, obviously we're talking about the Kings. I read somewhere that the Kings tried to actually trade De'Aaron Fox instead of Tyrese Halliburton, but the Pacers said no. And so the Kings were left with either trading draft picks or trading Tyrese Halliburton. And they chose to trade Tyrese Halliburton instead of draft picks, which is hilarious to me considering you don't use your draft picks well, so just get rid of them at that point. Why would you? They got lucky. They got lucky that Tyrese Halliburton fell into their lap a couple years ago at 12. I mean, he should not have lasted that long. The Celtics had the 14th pick that year. I was screaming at my phone like, please fall to the Celtics. I want Tyrese Halliburton so bad. He's a great player, and turned out he is a great player. But obviously the Kings were smart for once and took Tyrese Halliburton. And what do they do with their one smart draft pick? Trade him away. Get him out of here. We don't need good players. It's so sad. It really is, man. I don't know. But anyway, getting back to this trade, sorry. Again, Marvin Bagley's been kind of a catastrophe for him. And he was going to be out of there this season regardless. So, you might as well trade him when he has some kind of worth. Getting a young guy like DiVincenzo, I think he fits the team better than Marvin Bagley does anyway. And also, two other rotational pieces in Trey Lyles and Josh Jackson that might help that playoff push a little bit. I think they did really good here, honestly, And I think that I may even look back on this and think that it's an A+ if DiVincenzo sticks around and starts to develop. Because he was starting a little while ago, a couple years ago for the Bucks, and it was looking like he was going to start to really come into his own, and then obviously injuries have derailed him since then. But I think if he decides to stick around and he develops, this is not going to be an A. It's going to be an A+ for the Kings. So good job on the Kings. Give credit where credit's due. Clippers get an A- here. They got rid of a huge amount of cap space and tax penalty by getting rid of somebody that they didn't necessarily need in Serge Ibaka. And what they got back for it is honestly, it's mostly irrelevant, considering that, again, the main goal was just to get rid of a whole bunch of tax penalty and a whole bunch of cap space. That was their main goal. They didn't really need Serge Ibaka. It does leave somewhat of a hole in the front court for them. I think they only have 2 centers on their roster now. One of them is Ivica Zubac, whatever, how you pronounce it. And then I don't even remember who the other one is. Sorry. But, they might need to end up, here's the first time I'm going to talk about this, going to the buyout market here and kind of looking for somebody that they might be able to snag. That's a big man that might be able to help them. Somebody like a Paul Millsap or a Robin Lopez, somebody like that might be able to give them some depth at the center position. But other than that, I think that the buyout market might yield something of worth for them. But other than that, a great trade for them. They did what they came to do. They got rid of some cap space. And Rodney Hood and Semi Ojeleye aren't horrible players, but they do add to the wing issue there. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, good job by the Clippers. And finally, Detroit gets a C- from me. It would be lower if I still didn't believe that Marvin Bagley could develop into something of relative worth. So, I'm still a believer in Bagley, but for me, they gave up a lot to go get him. 2 second-round picks for a rebuilding franchise. I don't like it when rebuilding franchises trade draft picks for guys that are unproven. I just don't think that's really that great of an idea. I do kind of understand it. You take a chance on a guy with a lot of potential like Marvin Bagley, you might hit on it. And if you only give up 2 second-round picks, but he ends up becoming an all-star, that might work out for you. But, honestly, the Pistons have tried this before. They've tried reclamation projects in the past, and two of them in this trade actually, in Trey Lyles and Josh Jackson, but none of them have really worked. I mean, they've just given up picks after picks and coughed up all this money, and all these reclamation projects really haven't worked, so something's not clicking. So I'm not sure how much belief I have in this panning out for them. And plus, Bagley is a free agent at the end of the year, so unless you somehow convince him right now, upon trading for him, to sign an extension, but then also he develops immediately and that contract looks amazing in hindsight because now he's playing like an all-star, I just don't see how this is going to work out. I mean, if that doesn't happen, then if you're going to keep him and have him be worth that trade of two second-round picks, you're going to have to cough up a bag. Like, you're going to have to cough up some money, and I'm not sure that the Pistons are willing to do that. And again, I like Bagley. He's still young. He still has a good skill set, but I just think the risk at this point is not worth it for Detroit, especially since Bagley is only under contract for the rest of this season. Next up, the San Antonio Spurs traded Thaddeus Young, Drew Eubanks, who was immediately waived, and a 2022 second-round pick to the Toronto Raptors for Goran Dragic and a protected 2022 first-round pick. And the protection on this pick is interesting because it's fully protected in terms of the lottery for 2022. So that means that if it's picks 1 through 14, you're not going to get it. So that's unlikely since the Spurs are not going to make the playoffs. And then in 2023, so next year, it's not fully protected 1 through 14. It's actually just protected 1 through 13, which I don't think I've ever seen before, which is pretty cool. So it just goes down 1 pick. And then in 2024, it just turns into 2 second-round picks. So essentially, the Spurs are banking on them being terrible for the next couple of years, so they don't have to give up any first-round picks for Goran Dragic. So, again, really interesting protection on this pick. I don't think I've ever really seen a pick that's this heavily protected, at least in my very limited memory. So, anyways, for the Raptors, I'm going to give this a C+. I know I've given a lot of C grades here, but there's just a lot of trades that are just kind of to me. Like, they're not horrible, but they're not great. And I know that's not really super exciting, but I'm just being honest with you guys. A C+ here for the Raptors. Nothing too amazing. Thad Young's been a pretty decent player for a while, but he's never really been great. Goran Dragic's wanted out of Toronto since he pretty much was sent there. It hasn't just really hasn't worked out for him there. So, it was good to kind of get him out of there and get a second for it too. You did give up a first round pick for that. I don't really know how that's going to work because, this pick is so heavily protected, but, I know I said that the Raptors are kind of banking on being bad, but they're not bad. I think they're the 6th seed in the East right now. So all that protection, and you might just end up having to give up the pick anyway this year. So I think the Spurs, really got a good deal there. But anyways, back to the Raptors. It just kind of feels like the Raptors didn't want to lose this trade. Like, they put just so much weird protection on this pick. It felt like the owner was like, I will do anything to not lose this trade. For the Spurs, they get an A+. This is my first A+ of the video, so congratulations to the Spurs. You guys are absolutely killing it in this trade deadline. That's why the Spurs have been such a great organization for so long. They really do well with stuff like this. Obviously the main goal of this trade was a salary dump, getting rid of Thaddeus Young, getting rid of Drew Eubanks, just kind of getting rid of salary. And also, they're going to buy out Goran Dragic's contract, at least according to reports. So, again, salary dump, and, they're not going to even have to pay Goran Dragic against the cap. And, there's a good chance that they're going to get another first-round pick this year. Again, like I said, because the Raptors are pretty good this year, it's likely that they're going to make the playoffs. even without Goran Dragic. So, that obviously means that they would avoid the lottery and the Spurs would get that pick this offseason. So I think the Spurs made out really great in this trade. So, the Raptors didn't really want to lose this trade, but they did. They did lose this trade. They ended up not doing nearly as well as the Spurs, I think, in that deal. So, all right. Only a couple more trades to go over that were not the Celtics trade. So just keep bearing with me. I know this is a little longer of an episode. So thank you guys again so much for sticking this out. I love doing this stuff. I love the NBA trade deadline. I've been so excited to do this video for so long. So thank you guys so much for watching and sticking around for this long. All right. Next trade we have. This was probably the most surprising trade of the week, other than maybe the James Harden and Ben Simmons trade. This trade is the Dallas Mavericks trading Kristaps Porzingis and a future second-round pick for Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. What can I say? I'll tell you this. It is 2 A+ in a row for me, for the Wizards here. I have no idea how you pulled this one off if you're Washington. I understand, for Dallas, Kristaps hasn't worked out all that much, but man, how did you pull this off if you're the Wizards? Not only did they not give up any draft picks, first rounders, second rounders, nothing, for Kristaps Porzingis, who's still young, still very, very good, they actually got an additional second rounder for this deal. Like, how in the world were you able to make that happen? It's absolutely wild to me. And, the reality of the situation is that Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans, they were not fitting into Washington's roster nearly as well as they thought that they would. And neither of them are cheap. They are owed a combined $96 million over the next 3 seasons. So if you're thinking, well, yeah, Kristaps is a great player, but he's on a big contract. True, but they also gave up some big contracts in order to get Kristaps. So the salary, I don't know if it exactly adds up, but 3 years, $96 million, that's about 32 a year. I don't know how much exactly Kristaps is getting paid, but it can't be too much more than that. So, the difference would be only a few million. So, it's really not that much of a hard hit against the cap, as it may seem like it would be. Getting rid of the contracts of Dinwiddie and Bertans is, and getting a draft pick along with Porzingis, I really don't know how this trade could have gone any better for the Wizards. Like, it really, really, really was just an amazing trade, and the Mavericks get a D-. Why? Like, why is this the trade? You're telling me you couldn't find any better trades for Kristaps? Like, that just seems pretty crazy to me. Like, I understand that Kristaps Porzingis hasn't been exactly what you thought. When he's not hitting shots, it can be really rough out there. It can be bad, but this is really the best that you can do. It's very confusing to me, the end result of this trade. They have an absolute logjam at point guard now. Like, Luka Doncic, Jalen Brunson. Like, you've got really good young players already at your point guard position, and now you throw Spencer Dinwiddie in there, who needs a lot of minutes and needs the ball to really be successful. And guys, Luka's going to take 40 minutes a night at the point guard position. Like, that's just how it is. He's one of the top 5 players in the NBA right now, probably, if not top 10, So, like, Dinwiddie's not going to... How much is he going to really do in terms of minutes unless you're going to play him at the shooting guard position, which, if he's not going to have the ball in his hands, he's not going to be very effective. And Porzingis wasn't perfect, but his interior defense has always been pretty good. His rim protection has always been really good, and Davis Bertans, is basically useless if he's not shooting 40% from 3. Like, he can't defend, he's not a ball handler, he's not really much of a post player, he's not great at finishing around the rim. Like, he's just a shooter. That's really all he is. So, if you were kind of looking for a guy to replace Porzingis' shooting, you might have gotten it in Bertans, but everything else that Porzingis did for you, Bertans is not going to be able to do. So comparing the two, honestly, doesn't really look great for Bertans, and therefore it doesn't really look great for the Mavericks. And the only reason that this isn't getting a flat F is because I think Dinwiddie's actually a pretty good player. I talked about, he needs the ball in his hands, and that could be the fatal flaw in this whole scenario. The Wizards brought him in thinking that he could, be another scorer to help Bradley Beal, but when the two of them were on the floor together, his efficiency dropped way down, but when Bradley Beal's been hurt this year, Dinwiddie's played really, really well. He's just, he's one of those guys that really just plays well when there's no real semblance of talent around him. He's got to be the guy. Think about when he was really, really good with the Brooklyn Nets. When was he really good? When the Brooklyn Nets were terrible and had no one else that could really score the ball. Like, that's the way it is. Like, he's just one of those guys that needs the ball in his hands a lot and needs to be able to create his own shot. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, but when you're on the Mavericks and the guy that you're going to be opposite is Luka, who is the exact same and is dropping 30 a night, like, you're going to be the guy that's not going to get the ball. Sorry, Spencer Dinwiddie. But, again, I'm giving it a D-, and I'm not giving it an F because I think Dinwiddie still can be very good if given the chances. But I just don't think that this fits very well for the Mavs. Overall, it's a pretty awful trade for them. And the last non-Celtics trade that I want to discuss is actually the trade that ended up not happening. So, no more grades for non-Celtic trades here, so there you go. But the Los Angeles Lakers, they apparently had a trade on the table for Russell Westbrook and balked at giving out any additional draft pick compensation in order to get the job done. And apparently the Celtics and the Lakers also had a trade on the table. I don't remember who the Celtics were going to give up. I think it might have been Josh Richardson. But they were going to get Talen Horton-Tucker, who I would have been perfectly fine with that. I like Talen Horton-Tucker. I think he's got some potential. He hasn't played very well this year, but I think he's got some potential if he's kind of given a little bit of run and kind of coached up a little bit. But, the Lakers would have had to give up some more draft picks, and they balked at that too. So clearly the Lakers are really keen on holding their draft picks. But anyways, back to this. So, they had a trade for Russell Westbrook, who I said the Lakers got to get rid of at this point. I mean, it's just not working. They're not going to win a championship with Russell Westbrook as their point guard. It's just not going to happen. And crazy enough, the person on the table for the Lakers to trade Russell Westbrook for was John Wall, which is awesome. If you guys saw my first podcast episode, you will have heard, if you saw that portion of it, when I talked a lot about Russell Westbrook in that episode, that I think that the best fit for the Lakers to trade Russell Westbrook for was John Wall. I thought that, it made sense for the Lakers. He does a lot of similar things offensively that Russell Westbrook does, but he's also a better defender. And he's also not completely useless shooting the ball. So, that would really help. And obviously the Lakers agreed and the Rockets agreed that this could really work out well. But obviously, the Lakers decided that draft picks were more important than winning a championship. Awesome. Good job there. I thought that it would make the most sense for both sides for the Rockets to get Russell Westbrook to help him mentor Jalen Green and the other young guys there. And Russell Westbrook can take as many terrible three-point shots as he wants and shoot 40% from the field and 28% from three. And no one cares because the Rockets are terrible anyway and they're trying to lose anyway. So who really cares? And then John Wall can go and compete for a championship, which is what he's always wanted. So I thought it made perfect sense. Obviously, the Lakers decided against it. And, again, I find that surprising because I honestly figured that the Lakers would have traded Russell Westbrook for anyone offering Gatorade and a bag of jumbo great value beef jerky. But clearly they did not want to do that. I don't really know why. Again, I know that the draft picks are important to you, but you're paying $40+ million for Russell Westbrook. You're paying LeBron all this money and AD all this money. You're wasting, I don't know how many great years of prime LeBron James basketball LeBron James has left. He's what, 37 at this point? I mean, yeah, he's been a cyborg his whole career, but he's finally starting to get injured really for the first time. You know, the last 2 seasons, he's been injured a lot. That happens when you age. That happens when your body starts to give out on you. The guy's been playing more minutes in the NBA than anybody over the last 17 straight years, basically without being injured. And now his body's finally catching up to him, at least a little bit. Like, you don't know how much more time you have left with LeBron James on your team. Go for it while you have it. LeBron James is a once-in-a-generation talent. Go for it. He's on your team. Go for the championship. What are you doing? I don't get it. But you know what? I'm not running the Lake Show. So all we have to do is, I wish that trade would have gone through. I wish it would have been, because that would have been a really nice notch on my belt, because I felt like I would have been the first one to really talk about it, or at least one of the first ones to talk about it. So I thought that would have been really nice, but, all we can do is sit back and wonder what could have been, what if. And, now the Lakers are going to have to be stuck with Russell Westbrook until they eventually collapse like a dying star. Dying star. That's pretty appropriate given the circumstances. So now we move on to the Boston Celtics and all of the trades that they made over the last few days. And again, I know this is a bit of a longer episode, so thank you so much for bearing with me here. And now, my Celtics fans, we get to talk about all of the trades that the Celtics made over the week and into the weekend. I did watch the game on Sunday before the Super Bowl. I got to see Derek White in action. Don't get to watch a lot of him. They play in San Antonio. Obviously, they're in a different time zone. I've obviously seen him play before, obviously when they play the Celtics and in other games here and there. I love Derek White, but we'll get into that. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Anyway, sorry, I'm very excited about the trades here. So, I'm going to go through all the trades that the Celtics made this past week. They were pretty interesting, some for really good reasons and some for not so good reasons. So, let's get into them. This is obviously, I'm probably going to go into these trades a little bit more than I did the other ones just because I am a Celtics fan and I have a little bit of bias for them. I'm going to kind of be probably a little bit more emotional with these than I was with just the normal trades. So do bear with me with that. And I do think it is important to keep in mind the Celtics' main goal throughout these trades was, yes, some of them you were bringing in some really talented guys that could help you. But for the most part, you were also getting rid of some clutter on your roster. And mainly, your main goal was to get under the luxury tax. They would have had to pay repeater taxes had they been over the luxury tax again at the end of the season. And so the Celtics made trades to get under the luxury tax so they did not have to pay those repeater taxes. So they are going to have some more cap space. And I think they also got some trade exceptions for these trades coming in as well. So they're going to have some more money to play with next year and the year after that, and in this offseason. So, I'm very excited about what the Celtics did, but I think it's important to kind of give that context. Main goal for the Celtics for this trade deadline was, yes, to get some other talented players in there that could help the team right now, but also to get under the luxury tax. That was the main goal. So I think it's important to have that context. So with that, let's dive into these. Starting off with a smaller trade by comparison to the rest of these. The Celtics traded Bol and PJ Dozier along with a 2028 second-round pick with a top 45 pick protection to the Orlando Magic for a 2023 second-round pick with a top 55 pick protection on it. So, this was a straight salary dump for the Celtics. Obviously, I wish I could have seen Bol in a Celtics uniform. That would have been really fun. But obviously, both PJ Dozier and Bol were out for the season, so it was never going to happen anyway. So, obviously, the Celtics decided that it would be better to trade the salaries than kind of take a chance on them here. Dozier was immediately waived by the Magic. So, essentially they just kind of traded a second-round pick. They, just kind of swapped second-round picks for Bol to take a chance on him. That's essentially what it adds up to. So for the Celtics, I'm going to give it a B. Just a standard salary dump. They get a better pick in the process, which is always nice. So, your standard run-of-the-mill salary dump trade, and when that is your goal, you're going to get a higher grade than just a C. Some run-of-the-mill trades are just run-of-the-mill trades because they're not all that great. But some of them are just, hey, I'm going in here trying to get rid of some salary. It's not going to be a flashy trade, but I'm going to get the job done that I have been assigned, which is to get rid of some salary. And that's exactly what the Celtics did. So it gets a B from me. Magic, I'm going to give it a C-. And the reason is because they already have one meme-worthy and popular song titled Center in Mo Bamba. So, why not bring in Bol? Why not have all the memes at center for your team, right? I think that makes sense. Wrong. It does not make sense. I don't understand why in the world the Magic were the ones that wanted Bol. I think they're the worst team that he could possibly go to right now. They have like 93 centers on the roster, and they all play significant minutes. They obviously don't have 93, but they have a lot of centers, and I'll show you right now. Mo Bamba, who I mentioned earlier, and Wendell Carter both start for the Magic. They're both centers, although I think they now list Wendell Carter as a power forward. He's not a power forward. He's a center. He has been his whole career. He's a center. Just saying. But they both start, and they both average about 30 minutes a night. And then behind them, you got Mo Wagner, who averages about 13 minutes a night, and Robin Lopez, who averages about 18 minutes a night. So, totaling that up, let's say, let's average 30 minutes for both centers. I think it might be a little bit less, but let's just round up. 60 minutes, 13 minutes, 18 minutes. We'll call it 20 minutes. We'll even it out on both ends. That's about 80 minutes for centers on your team. There are 48 minutes in a basketball game. The Magic play a lot of centers all the time. They always have. That's kind of been their calling card over the last 10 years, is that they just have centers on centers on centers. That's a lot of minutes for them. And Bol's main issue in Denver was that he never got any playing time. They never played him other than a couple of garbage minutes here and there. So, if that's his main problem, then why would you trade for him if you know you don't have a space for him to play? Why even bother at that point? I'm not giving it a worse grade than a C- because I do think Bol really can develop. I want him to go on a team where he can get some minutes so bad because I think he could really be good. He's a great rebounder. He's a great finisher around the rim. He can shoot. He can rebound. He can do a lot of great things, but he just hasn't had a lot of minutes. I think he could really be a great steal. He's a great talent. I just don't think it will be with the Magic, and I just don't think he'll reach that potential with all the guys in front of him. So, again, C- for the Magic there. On to the first of the two major trades made by the Celtics during the trade deadline. So the Celtics, they acquired Derek White from the San Antonio Spurs in exchange for Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, a 2022 top 4 protected first-round pick, and the right to swap first-rounders in 2028. So, wow. I definitely was not expecting a trade like this. I was hoping for a trade like this. As a Celtics fan, I was hoping that you'd be able to package some of your established players that you don't really want, like a Schroeder or a Josh Richardson, and maybe get a couple of your young guys that, you might not have a place for, like a Romeo Langford, who I thought was perfect for this scenario, and hopefully get somebody that is gonna be much better able to help your team, and that's exactly what the Celtics did. And man, I'm personally really, really, really excited about this trade. I think Derek White fits perfectly with what the Celtics' identity is. Defensive energy, a good scorer, and plus he's really taken a step up in terms of his passing this year. He's his assist percentage is a career high this year. He's averaging almost 6 assists a night. So, and he's not even the number 1 point guard out there in in San Antonio with DeJounte Murray out there. So, it's not like, he's playing like 32, 35 minutes a night to really showcase that passing. He's doing all these stats while not really playing a whole ton. So, I think he just, the Celtics really desperately need guys that are good passers, because, obviously your stars and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown leave a lot to be desired in that realm. He also is a below average shooter. So, that fits the Celtics this year. They just are a team full of below average shooters. That's like their favorite thing. But, again, he's a young guard on a long, controllable contract, which is always a really, really great get. I think he'll fit really well in the culture in Boston. Again, I watched the game on Sunday, and man, the fans really took to him. They really, really seemed to enjoy, watching him play. He's not the best three-point shooter in the world, but we knew that already. But he was making great passes right off the bat. He was driving. He wasn't hesitant to shoot, which I think is great. I think a lot of times Celtics are hesitant to shoot at times, which I think is a problem when, you're trying to, consistently make baskets. If you're hesitant to shoot it, you're probably not going to make it. So he's very confident. He was ready to roll, ready to go. He's making great passes. He looked really great. Defensively, he looked pretty well as well. Obviously, he's a bit undersized, which is his main issue on defense, but he's very tenacious. He gets his hands on the ball. He caused a couple turnovers, got a couple steals. So he's a very, very good defender, albeit a little bit undersized. But I think that he will really fit well in Boston. I love this for Boston. The Richardson contract had to go. $12 million this year and next year. It just wasn't going to work out for what he was giving them. He wasn't really playing a huge role on the team anyways, save for a couple of big games where he scored like 20-plus points here or there. But consistently, he wasn't really, getting the playing time that warranted that $12 million contract. And I like Romeo Langford a lot. I think I might really be the only person left that thinks he could still be great. I think this record still stands, but he scored more points than anybody in the history of Indiana high school basketball. Over 3,000 points in his career. Now, think about that for a second. We celebrate 1,000 points, and 1,000 points is hard enough. He scored 3,000. He tripled that in high school. Like, it's absolutely wild how good of a scorer he was in high school. And then, obviously, he didn't do as well in his 1 year at Indiana for the Hoosiers. And then obviously he fell to the Celtics in the lottery. And I thought that was a really good pickup for them. I thought he could give them what they needed, especially defensively. But injuries have really derailed his career. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy, especially early. And, your first 2 years, 3 years as a rookie, or as a young player anyway, those are the most important years for your development. That's when you really have to get into the gym, get used to the NBA play style, get used to the speed. And Romeo Langford spent most of his first 2 seasons just trying to recover from injury. He didn't really have his off seasons to prepare and to get better. He was literally just trying to not get hurt again, which, again, really derailed him. I think, he still has potential, but he hasn't gotten consistent playing time since he came back. And since he started, not getting injured, and time is definitely running out to reach his potential at this point. The pick stuff, it's not ideal. The 2 first round picks, or the 1 outright first round pick, and then the pick swap. That's a lot to pay for Derek White. That might even be an overpay, honestly. But again, I think bringing in Derek White, who really just, I think, fits the culture in Boston perfectly on a long-term contract, so he can be there for a few years and really be a cornerstone of that franchise. I think, it was just probably too good of an offer to pass up for Brad Stevens, and I think he was willing to give that up, especially since the pick swap might not end up being anything. Like, if the Spurs are still, pretty bad in a few years, in 6 years, that pick swap won't even be a thing. So, like, it just, I think it was probably, again, too good of a deal for the Celtics and for Brad Stevens to pass up. So I'm going to give this a B+. I really, really want to give this an A. I genuinely am a huge fan of Derek White, but the contract it's pretty hefty. I think it's like $12 million the next few seasons. It's a lot of money, especially with Tatum's big contract, Brown's big contract, Horford's big contract, Rob Williams' big contract, Marcus Smart. Like, you got all these guys that are getting paid $10+ million, some of them $30, $25 million. Like, it's a lot of cap being held up here. So, there's not a lot of flexibility on the back end of your roster. But I love Derek White. And, I'm going to be honest. Another reason I'm not giving this an A is because I'm really not looking forward to seeing another NBA draft without the Celtics having a first-round pick. It's just not. I love drafts. I love watching drafts. And it sucks when your team doesn't have a first-round pick, especially when the NBA draft, when you only have 2 rounds. Like, it's really just frustrating when that kind of stuff happens. And now it's 2 years in a row that the Celtics aren't going to have their own first-round pick, and I'm not looking forward to that. So, as much as I want to, I just cannot. No, I can't give it an A. I can't give it an A. And, I've seen some people reacting to this trade and giving it bad grades, like giving it like C- and stuff like that. And, I don't really agree with that. And, some people just think Derek White and this contract and everything, that he's not a good fit. They needed some shooting. Whatever the case may be, I completely disagree with those claims. I really think that Derek White is going to be such a great fit, after Sunday's game and after, Friday's game where he played. I mean, that's crazy. Get traded on Thursday, play on Friday. That's really, that shows you how quickly he learns. It's not easy to learn a whole new offense and a whole new defensive scheme that quickly, but shows you how great of a player Derek White really is. He looked great. The C's looked great there. I think they've won 7 games in a row now. They're really looking great. I think, again, he'll be a perfect fit, especially in the next couple of years. It might not pay off this year because the Celtics are, still kind of down. They're not among the league. They're not among the top teams in the league. Your 76ers, your Nets, your Denver Nuggets, your Warriors, your Phoenix Suns, your Milwaukee Bucks, your Miami Heats. They're not in that group. But I think in 2 years, maybe 3 years, when, guys develop and guys get better and you bring in some more talent, I think that a guy like Derek White, who plays great defense, who's a great passer, and who can score a little bit, will really show himself in the playoffs when the C's are going to really need it. So, I think it's a great trade for the Celtics and for the Spurs. I'm also going to give it a B+ here. Like I said, I think that the package that they got for Derek White was not only fair, I think it might have even been an overpay for the Celtics. So from the Spurs perspective, you never want to give up a great young player on a reasonable contract, but I think they probably thought that, it was too much of a package to pass up for a rebuilding franchise. They got some extra picks, and that's always good for a rebuilding team. And now, with this trade and the trade earlier from with them and the Toronto Raptors, now the San Antonio Spurs, this rebuilding franchise, they're going to have probably 3 first-round picks this year, which is always fantastic because you can do anything. You can take 3 young guys and hopefully one of them turns into a stud. You can trade up, maybe even to like the top 3 and take an absolute stud and build around them, whoever that may be. I'm not super familiar with the draft class this year so far, but I will as time goes along and I get more time to kind of dive into that. But they do clear up a lot of long-term cap space by getting rid of White's contract to help keep their younger players and maybe even keep some draft picks that they've had that they really like, go after some big free agents. Whatever the case may be, the Spurs have completely hit the reset button on their rebuild, and they have made a lot of really, really good trades throughout this trade deadline and in the past. So they certainly have really done well. We'll see. You never know what happens with Romeo Langford. He might get a lot more playing time in San Antonio, and he might develop. He's already a pretty good defender, and he can shoot a little bit. And, when he has the ball in his hands, he looks pretty good. He can score a little bit. He can play a little bit. So you never know if he gets really... Greg Popovich, What a coach to grab a young guy like that. And if you're going to rebuild a guy like that, Greg Popovich is the guy I want in that meeting room. He's the guy I want in his ear. So you never know what's going to happen with Langford. We'll see. So good trade all around for both teams. And, I think, this is one of those rare trades where both teams get exactly what they want and get a perfect amount. I think that's really what happened here, which is really, really nice to see. And I'm really excited, if you can't tell by all the times I've said it, that I'm really excited to see Derek White in a Celtics uniform and playing consistently every night, or every game, not every night. But you get what I'm saying. I'm really excited for it. And the last-minute trade that came through at 2:59 p.m. The trade deadline is at 3, and this trade came through at 2:59, according to ESPN. This was the last major trade that the Celtics made that I'll be talking about. It was trading Dennis Schroeder, Bruno Fernando, and Enes Freedom to the Houston Rockets in exchange for Daniel Tice. I put this one last, and I don't know why I put this one last, because this was just my least favorite trade of the whole thing. Okay. Oh boy. Okay, Daniel Tice. So guys, for those of you who don't know, Daniel Tice has been a source of pain. Genuine, unbridled pain for Celtics fans for the last few years. Now, to be clear, none of this is Daniel Tice's fault as a human, okay? None of this, I don't blame Daniel Tice for any of this, okay? He's more of a symbol. You know how in wrestling, there might be a guy who you're supposed to like according to the program, but everybody boos them anyway because they don't like how the company is using them and they think that they should be using somebody else. Whatever the case may be, it's kind of like that. Like, Daniel Tice is kind of a symbol for me of Celtics incoherence at times with things. Like, that's basically what Daniel Tice has been for 2 years. It drove me and my other Celtics fan friends nuts when Daniel Tice was getting 30 minutes a night. I mean, it was driving us nuts, and then they traded him away. They traded him away, and Robert Williams, who we drafted in the first round at center, uber athlete, really great potential, finally got to play. I'm not kidding. Like, when we drafted him, a lot of my friends thought this guy's going to be our starting center. He can jump out of the gym. He gives us something that we desperately need, which is an alley-oop threat, a guy that can rebound, a guy that can just go up there and be physical, and a guy who's a rim protector who, spoiler alert, Daniel Tice is not. He's not a great rim protector. Like, we just needed that. But I'm going to have a stroke. Because the Celtics were so in love with Daniel Tice, who they got just from overseas. Like, it's not like they even drafted him or anything. They just got him as a free agent. Like, they were so in love with Daniel Tice that they started him, and Robert Williams never got to play for years. And it would drive me nuts. I would show videos to my father and be like, look at this guy. How good is he? Look at this cool thing he did. This guy meaning Robert Williams. And like, look at him. How great is he? And my dad's like, why doesn't he play? And I'm like, because the Celtics are playing Daniel Tice. And he's terrible. It's driving me nuts. Like, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to calm down a second. This I don't know why I saved this for last. But, okay. I'm going to try to be objective here. Sorry about that. Sorry about the rant. Okay. I'm good. So, Dennis Schroeder simply wasn't going to be a fit. And he wasn't going to fit in Boston, or at least not nearly as well as Derek White is going to. They needed to trade him to, again, get under the luxury tax threshold. Fernando and Freedom were just throw-ins to help with a little more salary. And Daniel Tice, look, when they traded him away, Robert Williams finally got to play. Robert Williams played really, really well, as we all knew he would. If you were a Celtics fan, we all knew he would. And now he's got a nice contract. He's averaging almost a double-double this year. You know, every game that we watch, he has some crazy alley-oop highlight or block highlight. I mean, I just watched the game on Sunday against the, who was it? Atlanta Hawks, I believe. It was against the Hawks. And he just had some blocks and alley-oops that you just look at, and you're just like, how does he does it all the time. How does he do that? Like, it's crazy. And now the Celtics trade for Daniel Tice again, and it gives me flashbacks that I don't like, but he's not the worst player in the world. He's not. He really, really isn't. I think the worst thing is his contract, $8 million for the next 3 or 4 years. It's something like that. So it's a lot of money for him, especially since he's going to be your third string center, essentially. Because, you know, with Al Horford and Rob Williams, obviously, you know, he's going to be your third string center. Obviously, Horford and Robert Williams start together. Although if it was up to me, I would start Grant Williams, but that's just me. But, you know, let's look at it this way. So if the Celtics picked up Al Horford's contract and his option next year, it will be about $26 million, I believe, is the option for him for next year. The Celtics, if they do that, will be paying $45 million to just their centers next year, which is just too much, considering, again, all the other contracts that we talked about that were on the team. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, like all these guys, Derek White now, like all these 10 plus, 20 plus, $30 million contracts that you have. I don't think that they're going to pick up Al Horford's contract, but, you know, if you don't, then I guess bringing Tyson is a better call, because at least you have some kind of a good backup for Robert Williams. But, you know, anyways, you know, I think the situation with Tice is a couple years ago, he was like the personification of one of Celtics fans' like biggest frustration, which is, why is Robert Williams not playing more? Like, he's so good, please play him. And Daniel Tice was like no, the Celtics won't play our lottery bound, you know, center that should have gone top 10 in the draft but fell because of injuries. And the reason why we're not playing him is because Daniel Tice is the greatest center in the world. Like, that kind of felt like what was going on, even though, again, none of this is Daniel Tice's fault. He earned those minutes. He practiced hard. He played hard. He did his job. Like, he earned those minutes. None of this is to say that this is Daniel Tice's fault. It just, he was an idea. He was the personification of it. Does that kind of, I don't know if that makes sense, but, you know, but him coming back now, you know, the worst part about it was that he wouldn't, like, he played 30 minutes a night, and that was the crux of it, is we didn't want him to play that much. But now, if he's coming in and he's just going to be a backup, he's going to play 10 or 12 minutes a night, spell Al Horford, spell Rob Williams when they need to sit for a little while and rest, or, you know, God forbid, if one of them gets injured, Daniel Tice is a perfectly capable backup, and you're not going to lose that much on the defensive end. Like, you know, if that's what's going on here, then I think that's honestly not that bad. It's not great, but it's not that bad. You know, and, you know, clearing the clutter at the center position makes sense. I mentioned it in the last video, or a couple of videos ago, whatever it was, when it pertained to Bol. Like, you know, it was hard for me to see if he was going to get any playing time, because I think the Celtics had 5 centers on their roster. So they were able to clear a lot of that clutter here. And, you know, Daniel Tice is familiar with with the system. He's familiar with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart. He's familiar with Robert Williams, Al Horford. He's familiar with all of those guys, so he's familiar with the system, so he'll be able to kind of pick up where he left off, at least presumably. I can see why Brad Stevens made this trade to get a guy that you can rely on because you had him in the past. But you couldn't get anything better? Because, I mean, the package that you gave up was pretty significant. I mean, Dennis Schroeder, Bruno Fernando, Enes Freedom, like, that's not a small package. Like, Dennis Schroeder was averaging 15 points a night. He's not a slouch. And he's a good defender, too. Like, he was not somebody that was just kind of a throw-in. Like, he's a good player still. So, I don't know. It just seems strange to me. But my grades. I have to give grades. Okay. A D. I can't bring myself to give it a better grade. Again, I understand why they did it. I'm biased. I admit it. I'm sorry. I am. I can't bring myself to do it. When I saw this trade, like when I saw the Derek White trade, I was like, okay, Dennis Schroeder's gone. They're traded him. We're just gonna have to see what they get back for him. And when I saw that it was just Daniel Tice, no draft picks, no cash considerations, no additional players, it was just Daniel Tice, I was like, no, I can't do it. I can't give it a better grade than a D. It's gonna work out better than the D grade that I'm giving it. I just can't do it. And my other Celtics fans that may watch this that have followed it and know what they'll understand, I'm sure. I can't do it. I can't do it. It's just everything that happened was too fresh for me right now. So I'm giving it a D. For the Rockets now, moving on to the Rockets, I'm going to give it a B-. The reason is Dennis Schroeder's likely to be bought out, so, you're not getting Dennis Schroeder out of it. At that point, it's Daniel Tice for Bruno Fernando and Enes Freedom, who, by the way, Enes Freedom was also waived, so now you're just trading Daniel Tice for Bruno Fernando. So at that point, again, we've said this a bunch of times, salary dump. It was a salary dump, so it did the job of a salary dump, so I'm giving it a B-. Obviously, I could give it a B like I did with the other salary dump trade for the Celtics, but like you had Dennis Schroeder, you could probably use him a little bit, at least as a mentorship role for your young guys, and you're not going to do it. Like, you're not really getting anything out of it, I guess. You're not getting any draft picks out of it, so it's not quite a B. I'm going to give it a B-. It was, it did the job, but it wasn't very remarkable. So it gets a slightly above average grade for me of a B-. Whew. All right. We did it. So we got through the trade deadline episode. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did stick all the way to the end of this one, this was a doozy. It was a lot of fun to research and record. But, man, it certainly was a long one. I do apologize for that, but there was a lot of stuff to talk about this week. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. I cannot explain to you how much I appreciate the fact that you guys are watching this and checking this out. I love doing this each and every week, even if no one watches it. I would do it. I would literally do it for 0 views. I just love being able to do this. So thank you so much. And if you guys do want to see, more special videos like this in the future, maybe, not all of them will be as long as this one, hopefully, but, more special videos, doing kind of special topics, or if you guys have anything that you guys want me to talk about in my podcast, feel free to let me know in the comment section of any of my videos. I'll be able to get them. I'll be able to see them. So, just let me know. Whatever you guys want me to do, I will do my best. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Hey guys, me again. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out the Lopes Goes Last podcast. It means the world to me that you decided to stick all the way to the end. That's super cool. So thank you again. And if you really, really like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with all your family and friends because, you know, this is my passion project. This is what I love to do, and I really want the sucker to grow. And the only way that that can happen is through you guys, is if you guys can help me out. So again, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like the video, share with all your friends and family. That's the only way this is going to grow. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.